All right, so tonight we are in the book of Exodus, chapters 11 through 13. So we have quite a bit we're covering because it's not just the plague uh, that is discussed in these passages. It is the plague, and it is two festivals that God ordains for the children of Israel to do. Well, we'll talk about how long they have to do it in a little bit. So, we're going to skip a few parts of the scripture because it's repetition. Because you have God telling Moses, and then Moses telling Pharaoh, and then Moses telling the people, and then God telling Moses again, and Moses telling again. So we're going to take it down from about a 30-minute read to a 15-minute read to help us get through it all, right? Okay. All right, so starting in chapter 11 of the book of Exodus. Now the Lord had said to Moses, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. After that, he will let you go from here, and when he does, he will drive you out completely. Tell the people that men and women alike are to ask their neighbors for articles of silver and gold. The Lord made the Egyptians favorably disposed towards the people, and Moses himself was highly regarded in Egypt by Pharaoh's officials and the people. So Moses said, This is what the Lord says. About midnight I will go through Egypt. Every firstborn son of Egypt will die. From the firstborn son of Pharaoh, who sits on the throne, to the firstborn son of the female slave who is at her handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well. There will be loud wailing throughout Egypt, worse than ever has been or ever will be again. But among the people of Israel, not a dog will bark at any person or animal. Then you will know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. All these officials of yours will come to me. Sorry, I had a weird highlighting. It made it hard to read. Bowing down before me and saying, Go, you and all the people who follow you. After that, I will leave. Then Moses, hot with anger, left Pharaoh. And the Lord had said to Moses, Pharaoh will refuse to listen to you, so that my powers will be multiplied in Egypt. Moses and Aaron performed all these wonders before Pharaoh, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go out of his country. Did you all cover the last couple verses of chapter 12? Chapter 10 last week. Basically, Pharaoh says, get out, and I don't ever want to see your face again, right? Okay, and so this is the interchange immediately after that, all right? So Moses hadn't left yet. Pharaoh says, get out, don't come back. So now this is the interchange that Moses has with Pharaoh. All right. So verses 1 through 3 of this chapter, there are instructions for Moses to do from God, right? God's telling him, all right, Moses, this is the last one. There's not going to be any more after this. So hang with me. We're almost there, okay? And Pharaoh's not only going to let you go, he's going to force you out. He's going to say, get while the getting's good, because it ain't going to get any better, right? You're going now. If not, I will help you go. I want you out, right? He also tells him, I want you to ask for gold and silver things, okay? A lot of people talk about the jewelry that they gave them, but the word that's used there is a very generic word, and it literally means things. So anything that was made out of gold or silver, that's what they were getting. And then, just as the Lord said, he hardened Pharaoh's heart. Okay, so verses 4 and 5, Moses tells Pharaoh, this is going to happen at midnight. Okay? God always deals in specifics when it comes to his judgment, doesn't he? Because he doesn't want it to be misconstrued for some happenstance that is just by chance, right? So at midnight, Pharaoh, this is what's going to happen. All the things that we just went over. Every firstborn male, human and animal alike, in all of Egypt is going to die. And what's kind of interesting is there's a few people that speculate what was it that really caused this to happen? What did the Lord use to do this with? And they think some people think it was this some kind of bubonic plague. And I don't think so, because for something like this, God doesn't want there to be any chance that what his hand does could be blamed on some other thing. Yep, and going in and getting, yeah. And also, bubonic plague doesn't just look at the firstborn sons, right? It's not a respecter of age, person, anything. This was a very specific event. And the only reason I bring that up is because every once in a while people get ideas, they want to figure things out too much, rather than just believing what God says, right? I'm going to send the destroyer, and he's going to kill him. Then there's going to be wailing. And in some translations, I think this one it did as well, it says, as there never has been or ever will be again in all of Egypt. How did God say he was going to make his distinction between the Israelites and the Egyptians in this? So quiet that there isn't even going to be a dog barking at somebody. And I went to bed last night, and I could easily have fallen asleep in my chair, so I got up and went to bed. And just as soon as I laid my head down, what do you think happened? Some old hound dog decided that he heard or smelled something 4 miles away and was gonna beller at it all night long. Oh my goodness! I just thought, oh, I'm gonna find you, dog. Right? But I can't think of a night where I don't hear a dog barking somewhere in the distance. And this was all of. Who remembers where the people of Israel are? Not in Egypt, but where at in Egypt? They're in Goshen, right? It's a meadow area. It's where herdsmen typically were. So that's where they were. So that's how the distinction was made between the Israelite people and between the Egyptians. Think back to the other plagues. What other distinctions were made? Okay. So let's think specifics here. So we had the plague of darkness. It was light in Goshen. We had the plague of the waters, but Goshen had good water. You had the plague of the frogs and the gnats and all the things, right? And they weren't in Goshen. And so throughout this entire set of plagues, there was a hand over them that kept all these plagues from coming through and harming God's children. And so when you think about that, he is this entire time showing his divinity, his power, his strength, that all of this is caused directly by him because he could decide who gets it and who doesn't. So I wanted to bring that out, especially because sometimes we miss those things, and in our mind we think, oh well, the Israelites are going through all this too, and they didn't go through all of it. So, all right, on to verse 8. Right, this was not a polite interchange, right? Pharaoh had his words, and Moses had his words, and then Moses huffed off. I think the very end there. Then Moses, hot with anger, left Pharaoh, and I put my Lonny E's in there and stormed out. Right? He slammed the door on the way out. You know, it's the almost like the angry teenager leaving the house. And then, as we saw with the previous 9, what happens with Pharaoh and his heart? Hardened again. I recently had a discussion with somebody who was talking about, you know, what kind of a kind God would cause this kind of destruction to people. And I take that back. It was not my discussion. And the person who was telling the story talked about some questions that he asked. And I bring this up because this is one of the stories that people who try to poke holes in any discussion about God's goodness come to. And so you start he started with the question, well, what are the characteristics of God, of a good God? And they basically told the characteristics of God. He'll know everything. He's all powerful. You know, all those things. It's okay. Well, you just described God and his characteristics. That's good. So, if a God is all-knowing, don't you think that he would be able to know everything that someone like Pharaoh had done in the past, and everything like someone like Pharaoh would do in the future? And they're like, well, yeah, he would. Okay. So don't you think that a God that's good would use his power when he has gone? Oh, no, he asked this question. So what is like a horrible thing that somebody can do? What would you consider one of the most horrible thing that somebody could do? And what do you guys think is one of the most horrible things that somebody can do? Okay. Abuse your child, hurt your child. And so he said, well, you know, it's funny you should say that, because Pharaoh, the pharaohs, twice now, have killed children. You know, they or twice tried to, did once. And so he even talked about one thing where they would take a child and put it in the hands of a bronze god, and they would heat those hands up till they were burning red, and that baby would burn to death in the hands of that idol. And so she thought, oh yes, that is absolutely terrible. And so, well, that is what Pharaoh did. So don't you think that a good God would want to stand up for people against that? And so the whole conversation, instead of trying to go head for head, started having them think about the situation. And so God hardened Pharaoh's heart to the point that there was no turning back of any which way. So yeah, I just brought that up because it was an interesting interchange that you don't think about that often, about how to talk to people in their trying to debunk the Bible and God's goodness. So, all right, we're going to talk about the Passover now. So, starting in chapter 12, Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, "This month is to be your first month, the first month of your year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his entire family, one for each household. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with the nearest neighbor. Having taken into account the number of people that are there, you are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or goats. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month." So when are they choosing these animals? They're choosing them on the 10th day. And when is it that they're slaughtering them to prepare them for the meal? The 14th day. So how long are they taking care of this critter? 4 days. And so they would have this animal there for 4 days. Take care of them till the 14th day of the month, when the members of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. Then they are able to take the blood and put it on the sides and the tops of the door frames of the house where they eat the lambs. That same night, they are to eat the meat roasted over fire, along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat the meat raw or boiled in water, but roast it over a fire, with the head, the legs, and the internal organs. Do not leave any of it until morning. If some is left in the morning, you have to burn it. This is how you are to eat it: with your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and the staff in your hand. Eat in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. On that same night, I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn. I'm going to stop there because this is all kind of a repetition of what was before, right? I'm going to tell them to strike down everybody. But if you have the blood over your door, then I'm going to pass you over, which is where Passover comes from, right? All right. So God is defining the Passover, and if we go to the end of this, might have been in the next section. God says that this is my Passover. Okay? And it's his because he defined what it was. He's the one that brought it upon them, and he's the one that protected them through it. So, God defined the time frame. Okay? Going to start on the 10th day of the month is when the preparation begins. On the 14th day of the month is when the Passover begins. Now, they didn't go through the entire festival that they talk about later in the book, in the chapter, excuse me. But this ended up being a 7-day festival. Okay? The second thing God defined was what the sacrifice was. And so it was going to be a 1-year-old male lamb. So let me ask you a question. So all through this, he talks about the lamb. Where does he say to take the lamb from? The sheep or the goats? And I don't know, I read stuff and I'm thinking, my farm background kicks in and says, there aren't lambs in a herd of goats. There are kids in a herd of goats, right? There's not lambs in a herd of goats. But when I went back and checked, did some word searches, it said that the Israelites didn't have a huge distinction between goats and sheep. They were kind of seen as close cousins of the same animal, if you would. And so it's possible that you could choose either a sheep or a goat, but everywhere in there it says lamb, and everything I've ever heard talks about it being a lamb. So I dug a little bit deeper, and there's a word in there that's used for the flock that you choose them from, and it's the word say, S-H-E, I think is the spelling of it, but it's pronounced say. And it means a member of a grazing flock. And they use the same word for goat or sheep. And so I think when they translate it, that's why they put it in there. So the next thing that God defined was the community. So who all was supposed to take part in this sacrifice? Every family. And how did God tell you to define who you celebrated with? By the number of people, right? So if you had a big family, you might just be your family. If you didn't have a big family, it might be a block party. You just don't know, right? And so he defined who all was going to be there. And it was based on the food that you were going to prepare and the number of people that were in there. All right? Preparation. Like I said before, God is a detailed God, isn't he? All right? So how long did we say we cared for the animal? For 4 days. When were they supposed to slaughter it? Yeah, at twilight, which is dusk, right? They're saving the blood, and they're roasting it over fire. Okay? Anytime you have a specificity of fire, what does fire represent in the Bible? It's a process of purification. And that's why God said you're not boiling it, you're not eating it raw, you're roasting it over fire. And so this has to do with purification of the lamb, okay? And you're not just keeping the good parts, right? You're not just going to do a rack of lamb. You're going to make head cheese. You're going to okay. You're having the head. You're having the legs. You're having the organ meat. Okay. You're not getting rid of any of it. And why do you think that might be? Okay, to not waste it. Okay, that's why they're eating so they have the strength for the journey. What's that? So be whole. What does the lamb represent? Represents Jesus. Okay? So he is saying, I want you to take the whole lamb. You can't pick and choose your favorite parts. Just like when Jesus comes, he wants us to take all of Jesus. We can't just pick the sermons and the stories that he told, the parables, and pick the ones we like because they feel good to me, and leave off the ones that we don't like. Okay? It's like, man, Jesus, that was a little piece of intestine you just preached there. I don't know that I like that too much, right? It's too bad you got to eat it because you need to take all of that Passover lamb, which to us, that is Jesus. I would think you'd want to be first in line, yeah. unless they're starting at the back. I'd kind of like to be in the middle. They'll be getting to that rack of lamb about that time, right? There you go. All right. Okay, we're keeping the blood, and we're putting it on the doorposts. Now, in the later part where they're talking about applying the door, it doesn't just say to put it on. Anybody that was raised in church and saw the pictures of the Israelites putting the blood on the door, what does it look like? Okay, hits up branches. And how was it applied? Just in your mind, what does it look like? Just kind of like just paint it up and paint it down, right? Okay. Yeah, and that's I have always had that too until I started reading this, and there's actually it says, take the hyssop and strike the mantle and the doorposts. And so that all of a sudden gives you, and that word strike is the same word that is used when Jacob had his hip socket touched and put out of place when he was wrestling with God. Exact same word. Okay, so you don't. I've always thought, God just touched it and, he forced it out of place. But that word means to strike. And so now all of a sudden that has a different connotation. So now you don't have this painted effect anymore. You have a whack and a whack and a whack. And so now, yes, now all of a sudden that doorpost represents what? It represents the cross and the blood that was shed on the cross. All right. The next thing is the attire, what you're going to wear. Your dinner clothes are defined now. Okay? In verse 11. What is it they're supposed to wear? Yep. You're wearing your traveling clothes, right? It specifies your cloak tucked into your belt. Okay? Why do you think that would be specified? You're going to be moving fast, right? And if you don't have your belt around your cloak, it's all of a sudden a cape, right? And so have your outside shoes on, right? Don't be wearing your house slippers. You need to have your sandals on. You got to be ready. Have your walking stick in your hand. Okay? So this is every picture of be ready to move. All right, even the consumption is defined. What is it they're supposed to consume? Everything. And if they can't consume it, what are they supposed to do with it? Burn it. Okay? Why do you think God is so specific about not having any left over? Okay? You would think they're not able to take it with them, but they take a lot of other stuff with them, right? Okay? This is why. It's because God wants them to learn that He is their provision. And He's going to provide for them now, and He's going to provide for them in the future. And so He doesn't want them to take His provision for today and turn today's provision into tomorrow's preservation. Right? So he doesn't want them to take all the leftovers for fear that tomorrow I might have to eat leftovers. Because He's saying, you're taking what I give you now, and tomorrow you'll take what I give you then, and the day after that you'll take what I give you then. The duration. This is what I almost started with, right? How long are they supposed to observe this festival? Not how many days, but for what period of time are they supposed to continue to observe it? Forever. Okay, and God even goes so far to say this is a regulation. Verse 17. Celebrate the festival of the unleavened bread because it was on this very day that I brought you out of Egypt. Celebrate this as a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. And some translations say command, some say regulation. So God is serious. You're doing this every year forever. Let's talk about yeast, right? It's mentioned in this 14 times. And other than maybe the lamb or the firstborn child, I can't think of any other phrase that is probably used as much as he talks about yeast throughout this. Okay? So what does he say about about yeast? Does anybody? We haven't gotten to that to read it, but anybody remember? Don't eat any of it. Get it out of your house. What's that? If you eat it, you're going to be excommunicated, right? You're out of here. Um, let's go to chapter 13. This is moving forward because this is where it is retold. There we go. Chapter 13, verse 7. Eat unleavened bread during these 7 days. Nothing with yeast in it is to be seen among you, nor shall the yeast be seen anywhere within your borders. Okay? So it's not just within our house. He's saying, don't take the yeast to the barn to store it for a week. All right? You are to get rid of it. I don't want yeast anywhere. Why is God so put off by yeast in this, do you think? It stinks. It can stink. Yeast was used all through the Bible as an image of what sin does. Okay? It rises, it permutates through everything. A little leaven will leaven the whole lump, right? So it starts with just a little bit, and as it grows and works, it consumes everything that it's in. And so this yeast is an example of sin, but it's also an example of all of the cultural things that they've been a part of for 430 years. And so all the customs that they've witnessed that have more than likely crept their way in somehow, all of the ways that they lived, all of the ways that they made relationship, just if you think about anything that wasn't of God, this is what God wanted out. I want you to leave everything behind because I'm going to show you a new way. What does that sound like? Salvation. Right? I'm going to make it all new. Leave away your old self. I'm going to make it all new. Okay? And I'm going to keep coming back to this because this was what God's intention was for Passover, was to define what will happen when the Messiah comes and show what salvation is. Okay. Verses 12 and 13. On that night, I will pass through the land, and I will judge, and I will pass over those with the blood applied. Anybody know what that looks like in the New Testament, or what that would reference in the New Testament? Okay, think end times at this point. Okay, this is the rapture. Mm-hmm. Yep. But this is a picture of the rapture. Okay, the New Testament in the rapture, he talks to it, mentions it as being like a thief in the night. Right? When is the death angel coming? In the night, in the middle of the night, in the wee hours, right? And but for the rapture, instead of judgment coming on those with no blood applied, he's going to take and preserve those that have the blood of Jesus applied. So it's being flipped here. That instead of it being just judgment on those, it is total redemption for those who applied Jesus' blood to their life. Just like it's total redemption for the Israelites who had the blood applied to the door. Okay, so in verse 27 through 28, 21 through 28 is a retelling of what we just went over. And then 29 is the attendance of, or the arrival of the death angel, right? At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the livestock as well. Pharaoh and all of his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was a loud wailing of Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. Not a house. Every neighbor, every block, every town, not a house. And so, going on to verse 31, during the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron. What was it that Pharaoh said? Right before before chapter 11? Leave me and I don't ever want to see you again, right? Go away from me. I don't want to see you again. And so now somebody's having to eat some crow, aren't they? Because he's calling Moses back in. And he said, "Get up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and the herds as you have said, and go. And also bless me." How much humility do you think that took? The Egyptians urged the people to hurry and leave the country, for otherwise, they said, we will all die. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added in kneading troughs wrapped in clothing. And the Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked them for silver and for gold and for clothing. And the Lord made the Egyptians favorably disposed toward the people, and they gave them what they asked for. So they plundered the Egyptians. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Succoth. There were about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. Many other people went with them, and also drove large droves of livestock, both flocks and herds. With the dough the Israelites had brought from Egypt, they baked loaves of unleavened bread. The dough was without yeast because they had been driven out of Egypt, and they did not have time to prepare food for themselves. Now, the length of the time the Israelites lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430 years, to the very day, all the Lord's divisions left Egypt, because the Lord kept vigil that night to bring them out of Egypt. And on that night, the Israelites are to keep vigil to honor the Lord for the generations to come. All right. So the Egyptians said, get out, right? What were they supposed to take? Everything. Their animals, their belongings, everything. What did they end up taking? All that plus the plunder of Egypt. And what did Pharaoh ask Moses to do? To bless him. I think that's hilarious myself. That you have this person that is stiff-necked against everything that the children of Israel have to do, and then his final words to Moses and bless me. Okay? So this shows that Pharaoh all of a sudden realized that the Israelites' God was the God over all gods, that there was no God above him. And so for someone who thinks he is God, as Pharaohs did, that is a huge thing to reconcile in your mind, isn't it? Verse 33, all the Egyptians urged them to go quickly. I kind of envision in the old movies how they would rush people out of their house, and they grab them by the belt, and they grab them by the shirt collar, and they'd help them out. Yeah, they were ejected, right? So the rest of it, we've the only other point I wanted to make is that this night was ordained by God. There's one commentary that actually said the night was reserved by God. He planned it so that would be the very day that they had arrived in Egypt 430 years ago. And now he gives them a new calendar. He says, okay, this is the first month of your year now. So all of this stuff is all brand new now. All because of the Passover. All because of the sacrifice that they make of this lamb. So chapter 13 is kind of a different animal that's thrown in there, and it is the consecration of the firstborn. They're dedicating their firstborn, and every year, as part of the ritual, this is what they do. Consecrate to me every firstborn male. The first offspring of every womb among the Israelites belongs to me, whether human or animal. Okay? Why do you think God said this? It's a picture of tithing, but it's because he saved them. I delivered them, so they're mine. And they're mine for all of history. And I want you to remember this, because I preserved your firstborn, you're going to dedicate them back to me. All right? God even says specific words of how they want them to explain this to their kids. Okay? Further down in here, all of a sudden, there's this part about the donkey in verse 13 through 15. Redeem with a lamb every firstborn donkey, but if you don't redeem it, break its neck. But redeem every firstborn of your sons. In the days to come, when sons ask you, what does this mean? Say to him, with a mighty hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the hand of the slavery. When Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord killed the firstborn of both people and animals in Egypt. Okay? Has anybody been around a donkey? Okay? Have you ever noticed their neck? Like, no, their neck. Their neck, so like their head is this big, and they have a chin that's about that long, and everything else is neck going the whole way down. Their neck is outrageously strong. And this is how strong they are. Some horse breakers, in order to halter break new colts, or colts that have been longer than they should have been to be broken for halter leading, they will take the halter and they will tie it to the horse and they will tie it to the donkey. Because there is no animal on earth that can move a donkey if it decides it's not going to move. And its neck, that horse can sit and buck and jolt and do everything he can, and that donkey will sit there and its head will just kind of do this a little bit. I know this because we had a Jenny, which is a female donkey, and my dad trained some horses this way, all because somebody told him about it. And it worked exactly like it was supposed to be. Once the animal quit pulling and jerking against the donkey, then the donkey would decide to move and go where it wanted to. And as soon as the horse started thinking it was going to go a different way, it would sit down again, and it would wait until that horse gave up again. And then before long, the horse just realized, I'm going where the donkey goes because there's no other way to go. Okay? So this donkey is representative of Pharaoh and his stiff-neckedness and his hard heart, because he wasn't changing where he was going to go. Here's the other thing. In order to break a donkey's neck, that takes a ton of force. They would actually take like a sledgehammer to break the donkey's neck in this. That's how much force it took. And so when he says you have to break the donkey's neck, that is a tough task. And so you have a choice of either redeeming it or not redeeming it. It's whether or not you want to spend a sheep to do it. Okay? And all of this is supposed to be a visible reminder of God's deliverance. All right. Now, we're going to read verses 17 through 22, and then we'll be done for tonight. So verse 17. Did I not put the whole thing on there? I stopped at 16. Okay, I will tell you what 17 through 22 says. Okay. So, they leave Egypt, and there's two ways to go. There's a road that heads up north to Canaan, which is where they're going to go. That's where God ends up taking them, right? But God says, I'm not going to take them that way because they're going through the land of the Philistines. And if they are threatened with war, my concern is that they will turn back to all the stuff that they were just freed from. And so instead, God takes them the long way. And instead of going straight north, he takes them to the west. I'm trying to picture that in my mind. Toward the Red Sea. And that's the path that God takes them. All right? It was a slower way, but in God's mind, it was a safer way for that purpose. Okay? Anybody recall how God led them? A pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And I'm gonna close with this. When I was probably 20-ish, I was a member of a barbershop quartet. And we went to an international competition. And on the way back, I got bumped from third class up to first class, okay? And so I had, a nice big seat and all the fun stuff, and the other three guys are all seeing me through the window, and I'm kind of, waving at them through it. And I started pondering. I just thought, I wonder why the world I was chosen to come up here. And just as clear as the Holy Spirit was sitting in the seat next to me, he said, I put you here to protect you. To this day, I don't know what I was being protected from. But in that flight, we hit some turbulence, and they had to change route to go around this massive, massive supercell thunderstorm. And so I looked out the window, and so you see the whole, tumultuous cloud base under us because they were way, way up. And at the center of this cloud this storm was this pillar of cloud that just kind of rolled up like this from there, clear up above where the plane was. I don't know how high this thing was. And the sun hit that, and it literally looked like it was on fire. And my mind instantly went to this. And I thought, Lord, is this what that looked like? And of course, there was no answer, but it was just something in my mind. And I just saw that, and I saw the power and the strength of what God can do. And it was seared in my mind that day. And I wished it was the days of cell phones and what have you, so I could have taken a picture, because that would have just been just an outstanding picture to be able to show you all. So, so that is where we're leaving off for tonight. Okay, yeah. Oh, I saw the size of. Finally. We had a lot to cover tonight, and I know it was a lot to cover, but I didn't want to leave any of it out, because there's so much symbolism in the Passover that directly relates to us. And there was tons of stuff that I left out because I just don't have time.